Hi, I'm Chuck Sipe, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction.
Hey, I'm Chris Zigar, and I am the Director of Instructional Innovation and Planning here in the district.
The purpose of this video is to start our game on curriculum writing through our Ludo program. Our hope is that through this sequence of games, missions, and activities, we'll get a better understanding of what curriculum design is all about and why curriculum is so important to what we do on a day-to-day basis in the classroom. So our goal for this first video is to just do a walkthrough of our curriculum template, explain very briefly some of the key components and why they're a part of this template. And then subsequent videos will dig a little bit deeper into how to develop meaningful content for each of those sections. So why is curriculum important?
Okay, so the reason why we have the curriculum development we have is that you want to have a living document that has all of the important information for a specific type of unit. Now, when we're thinking about teaching, we're talking about student learning, what we really want to kind of put down on paper is what's important for students to learn throughout the duration of a year and how we're going to be able to teach that and how we're going to assess it. When we do that, then faculty, students, community all know kind of what's important throughout the duration of the year. It allows for students to have a better understanding of the important parts of the content areas. It allows teachers to have better discussions about student learning. And it allows for better communication between teachers and parents.
You know, one of the things that curriculum's gotten a bad rap over the years about is it became a 3-ring binder that weighed 100 pounds that were used to hold doors open during fire drills. So our hope is by going through a better understanding of the pieces of curriculum, we can embrace why it's such an important piece of supporting teacher autonomy, right? So what you'll see as we go through these videos is that curriculum is the framework. The framework for what we do in the classroom. One of the great things about this profession is the autonomy teachers have in their classrooms with their students on a day-to-day basis to help leverage that learning. So hopefully we can accomplish that goal. So
I'm going to talk a little bit about the template itself. Yeah.
All right, very good.
So I think what we're going to go through here is like the full template of curriculum writing. And the reason why it's organized the way it is and the reason why we have the template that we do is not because we took it from somewhere else, but because of the fact that it makes the most amount of sense based on how you want to design a curriculum. What it does is it funnels down. It gives you the reason why you want to teach what you're teaching in the unit. It gives the type of standards you have, and then talks about how this unit connects to all the other units throughout the year and how you're going to assess it. So what it does is it really kind of funnels it, so it makes the most amount of sense of how to organize a curriculum.
For sure. And so, to kind of get us started off, the beginning pieces of our curriculum template are pretty straightforward. Unit overview and the standards. You know, the overview should really be as it says there. What are we teaching and why is it important? These overviews should be something that are kind of the Cliff's Notes version of what's going to be contained below. The thumbnail of why this unit is integral to our learning. And it's really driven by the standards. So that first section of standards are, of course, our New Jersey standards. But as we try to reach the whole learner, as we try to accomplish our Portrait of a Graduate goals, we want to recognize that there's more than just those specific content standards. So below those standards, we're also going to identify 21st century life standards, career learning standards, which we've identified with our career ready practices, as well as technology standards. Now, as you're writing a curriculum unit, you may think that one of these, 21st century standards like financial literacy isn't applicable, and that's okay. Delete it. We've populated those so that they are a reminder that we need to be cognizant that what we teach in each particular unit, regardless of the content, extends beyond that particular content area. But they should be directly connected to that unit overview.
Okay. So the next part here that you'll see is on the left-hand side are the enduring understandings, on the right-hand side are the essential questions. So when we think about enduring understandings, the best way to think about enduring understandings is like timeless knowledge, right? When your student leaves, what are the things they want, or what are the things you want them to know that carries forth that matter moving forward, right? So you're not in the weeds with specific content knowledge of a specific unit. It is these kind of overarching timeless knowledge that you move on. Essential questions, on the other hand, are kind of the other part of that. They're the questions that one asks to get to timeless knowledge. So to give you some examples of both, I'm going to use history because that's where my area of expertise were. But when you look at something like an enduring understanding is something along the lines of war changes a population, right? And then your essential question would be something along the lines of how does war have an effect on the political and economic structures of a nation? All right? These become larger, drawn-out, multi-unit questions that you get to dig in with the specific focus questions of a unit or the specific knowledge of a unit to help build an overall understanding. So if I'm teaching like U.S. history 2 and I want to talk about, and I'm going to build in World War II, the content of World War II helps a student understand in the future not only what had happened in the past in World War II, but how making a decision to get into a conflict for their nation later on is going to have dynamic effects that are going to go beyond like what the army is doing or what's happening overseas. It's going to have dramatic effects on the population at home.
And those questions, they're not something you should be able to punch into a search engine
Right.
and have a simple answer to. These are complex, meaty questions that become, as you stated, those overarching driving goals of what we're teaching. You know, arguably, these are the two most important sections of a curriculum document, right, because they really drive everything that we're going to do. You know, even these three pieces below it, knowledge, skills, you know, those are the things that are really in here because they were synthesized out of the enduring understandings and the essential questions to really help drive the creation of individual lessons. Right. Like these sections of a curriculum document should help teachers through the lesson planning process. Not specifically to say these need to be the lessons, you know, plan development components, but they should help with the creation of lesson plans dramatically with identifying specific things students should know. And, you know, in the technology era, I think the knowledge aspects of a curriculum document have become somewhat minimized because knowledge is so ubiquitous. It's so easily accessible that the things that students need to memorize or have, you know, in their brains are not as copious as they once were. It's more about what can they do with it, right? Which is that skills section is if you know these things, in order to answer the questions, in order to capitalize on the timeless knowledge of the enduring understandings, what will they be able to do? Produce, create, develop, question. Maybe one of those skills is asking further questions. That's a super complex skill that if students are struggling with the world landscape, given that example of war, you know, maybe, you know, one of the things students will be able to do in the skills section is to synthesize historical experiences into the future of what war may look like. Or the you know the presence of war in a continued, you know, society. Right. So, you know, those knowledge and skills have become the driving forces for lesson plans.
So to reiterate all that, you have your enduring understandings, which is, you know, that timeless knowledge, essential questions, the questions that get you to that timeless knowledge. And like think of the knowledge and the skills as the building blocks that get you there.
Yeah.
So that's why you select the type of content and the type of skills that's going to best prepare those students to get to a place where when they leave you, they're successful in understanding how an expert thinks in that field.
For sure. And then recognizing that classes are populated with all sorts of different students. We have worked hard to create an accommodation modification statement that really encapsulates the unique needs of any individual learner. In each of our curriculum folders, we have a very specific listing of other ideas for accommodations. This is more of a general statement, which we'll keep consistent in our curriculum documents. We're certainly, of course, open to feedback on it. But as you will see if you read it carefully, it really identifies some global needs that could be reached for all students. And for the purposes of what curriculum does to connect a school with its community, here is where our curriculum publication would end. Right? All of this we're about to dive into with formative and summative assessments and some of these other sample things. Those would become internal in-house elements, which if we all work together, and by we all I mean those of us who are teaching certain content areas, certain units, if we work together to collaborate on the sharing of formative assessments, summative assessments, and all the other samples we're going to get into in a second here, it'll make our planning much, much easier. So you want to talk a little bit about the place of assessment?
Yes. So to break it down very basically between the two areas here, formative and summative assessment. Formative assessment is always a type of assessment that informs the next step for instruction and for learning, right? So formative assessments can come in a number of different types of ways. That could be the type of questioning that you're using throughout the duration of a lesson that will inform you to change how you're going to give instruction. It could be something as simple as exit tickets or entry slips. It could be student reflection on their own performance for the next step forward. So the most important thing about a formative assessment is that the point of a formative assessment is to gain information to make changes for the next step, either changing the lesson design or for a student to be able to change how they're either studying or what they're doing. So for a reflective piece.
And before you go into summative,
Yeah.
you made a really important point there. So formative assessment is how a teacher can redirect instruction either in the moment during that lesson or for the next lesson. But you also mentioned students. There's real great value in students leveraging their own formative assessment data to redirect their own learning, to begin to ask questions, to help support how they're grabbing onto a concept as they strive towards answering essential questions and grabbing those enduring understanding. So formative assessment is something that is critical for teachers to evaluate instruction in the moment, but also for students. And that's something that we need to teach students as we go along. Sorry to cut you off.
No, definitely. So to sum it up, formative assessments are about, if you're going to break it down to one thing, formative assessments are always about growth. How do things change? Whereas in summative assessments, the main focus is generally proficiency. All right. So how is a student doing? And it's a close off type of assessment. So this is where, like your unit test, you're not going to revisit those skills. You're not going to revisit some of the things you've taught there. What you're doing is you're looking for proficiency, a proficiency benchmark. Now, obviously, part of some of your formative assessments are going to have some summative components in them because they're going to be graded and they're going to go into a grade book. Some of your summative assessments are going to be formative because if students are struggling, there's going to be remediation. But the main point of a formative assessment is to look at where a student is for growth moving forward, and that changes a teacher's teaching or a student's reflective learning. And a summative assessment is mainly about proficiency. It's a benchmark where somebody is.
Okay. One of the best ways that was explained to me along the way was formative assessment is when the chef tastes the soup. I know a lot of people have heard this. Summative assessment is when the customer tastes the soup.
Right.
You know, so that ability to change in the moment is really the chef's role there. The last couple elements of this template are really self-explanatory. This is our hope of teacher collaboration. You know, our benchmark and alternative assessments, you know, we have some populated info here about using IXL and other platforms, and certainly it's not applicable to all areas. And if so, you can delete it and add how you benchmark students. But our hope is that we will begin to start to share exemplars, some interdisciplinary connections. How is what you're teaching relate to other areas, other interests for students, as well as specific modifications or tech integration. And then finally, what I think is probably the most important of this section are those resources. If you've found websites, if you've created handouts, if you've made videos, things like that, we would love for those to be shared so that that many hands do make light work. But the interdisciplinary connection, I don't want to just pass that up quickly, because one of the things that we ask our students, and I think it's important for us to reflect on as educators, is do they find what we're teaching important? How have they made connections? Those connections are to their own lives, but they should also be to the other things they're learning. And so this is a great place where we can memorialize some of that stuff. But this section is a great teacher sharing section of the curriculum document.
Right. I mean, this is we're looking at one part of a curriculum document that is truly a day-to-day kind of living part of the curriculum. When they use the term living curriculum, this is the part. People sharing ideas. These are the things that you can pull out and have discussions with during PLC time. What's working, what's not working. And then these become the places where you can build. New faculty members come in. It allows them not to start from a position of zero and be completely overwhelmed when they first come in of what they have to teach.
All right, so there's your walkthrough of the template with some quick rationale. Like I said, subsequent missions in this game will dive a little bit deeper into some of the meaty sections of this with some activities to match. A couple activities here to do to sum up this mission, but otherwise, hopefully this has given you some good information as to why we have developed the curriculum template we have, as well as how it really does support your autonomy as an educator and doesn't prescribe specifically what needs to be done. That is not the purpose, but the purpose is to be usable, interactive, and something that really helps leverage student learning.
All right. Well, thank you for your time.
All right. We'll see you on the next mission.